Hello, everyone. My name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO. Welcome to the Regional Transportation Advisory Council meeting, April 12th, 2023. I will just briefly go over some notices and guidelines we have to get us started today. So first of all, you are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_non_discrimination. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact me, Stella Jordan, at sjordan@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. You will probably have joined at the meeting today with a muted microphone. Please remain muted unless you're actively participating in the discussion. But you may mute and unmute yourselves. Please, at this point, if you haven't done so already, so rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. You can find this by either clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raised hand button at the bottom, or in the reactions button in the toolbar, and the chair will call on you. If you're joining us by phone, you can also use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have any technical difficulties today, again, you can please contact me, Stella Jordan, via the chat box at sjordan@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. I will turn it back over to Len for introductions.
All right, Stella, thank you very much. So please remind me about how tight our schedule is, because if we have time to do a quick round of intros, we'll do it. But if you recall that we're really tight, then we'll skip that.
I think we have time for introductions today.
Okay, great. So then we'll just do, I'll just call your name and you do whatever kind of introduction you want. Okay, so I'll start with Anna Cristina Fregosa.
Sorry, Anna Cristina Fregoso, Boston Society of Civil Engineers.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
No problem at all. John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk, Massachusetts.
Thank you, John.
We changed our name.
Oh, right. That's right. It used to be Walk Boston, right?
That's right. We're bigger now. We're bigger.
Wow. Well, now I think we have a challenge. So we'll have to do something with that.
Next
slide.
is the world.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, John. So John Stewart.
John Stewart, Walk Boston. Congratulations, John.
All right. Now I'm confused. But anyways, okay, we'll sort that out later on. Next, Amira Patterson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Amira Patterson, representing the MBTA Advisory Board, and Brian Kane.
Thank you, Amira. Andrew Jennings.
I'm on the board of the Lowell Regional Transit Authority and just learning from what you guys are doing.
Great, thanks for joining us, Ben. Ben Muller.
Afternoon, everyone. Ben Muller, District 6 Planner from MassDOT.
Great, thank you, Ben. David Montgomery.
David Montgomery, Town of Needham, still the same name.
David. Aaron McGuire.
Good afternoon, Erin McGuire, staff to the Boston Region MPO.
Thank you, Erin. Franny Osmond.
Hi, Franny Osmond. I'm also on the LRTA, Lowell Regional Transit Authority Board, and I think I'm going to start representing the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts when I come here, in addition to being involved in transportation issues in Acton area.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great, Franny. Mary DeCourcy.
Hi, Mary DeCourcy from Mount Auburn Hospital. We're just, interested in learning more about the work that you all are doing, especially as it pertains to access and transportation for medical care. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mary. It's really good to see you here, and you know that you can always find out more about it through your partner, Steve, who happens to be my colleague on the Arlington Select Board. So I'm really delighted to see you here, Mary.
Thanks.
And Owen McDonald.
Owen McDonald, Town of Weymouth.
Great, thank you, Owen. Tegan Tyke.
Hey there, Tegan Tyke. I'm the Executive Director of the MPO staff. Happy to join you guys for part of your meeting today.
Great, thanks, Tegan. Always happy to have the former chair of the advisory council here, Logan Casey.
Hey everyone, Logan Casey, Capital Programming Planner with the Boston Region MPO. I assist Ethan with the tip.
Great, thanks. And so that was a nice segue to Ethan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ethan Lapointe, Transportation Improvement Program Manager. I work on the tip.
Great. And Stella introduced herself, and I'll introduce myself, as the chair of the Advisory Council. I'm here representing the MBTA Right Oversight Committee, and so I have saved the last for Shalika Murthy because she is going to take us on to our next item on the agenda, the UPWP study selection. So Shalika.
Thank you, Lynn, and good afternoon, everyone. I don't have a presentation for today. Excuse me. Today, the goal really is to have the Advisory Council develop your list of recommended studies. The universe of proposed study has been posted to the meeting calendar, and I believe Stella sent out the Excel file that we've been working out of at the committee as well. Just looking ahead a little bit, next week, we will be bringing the Advisory Council recommended list as well as the staff recommended list to the UPWP committee and asking the committee to then make a final decision on which discrete studies will be funded in federal fiscal year 2024. So getting this list today is super important to myself and to this process, and we really appreciate the Advisory Council's input and support for the process so far. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions where I can.
Okay, great. And so I guess this is the signal to folks to raise your hand electronically if you want to speak. Although since we are on just one screen, and if you just want to raise your hand, that's fine too. Franny.
Two studies that I really would love to see are T1 and T2, ways of reducing school vehicle trips, and also the community connections shuttles, as well as T4. Working with Susan Barrett, she shares a lot of good questions that with me. I mean, I share a lot of her concerns. And so I really like the idea of moving forward with that kind of study of the most ideal, sort of looking more globally at our needs because there's so much repetition all over the place. Anyway, I just wanted to put in a word for those.
I support that. And I'll just say, in respect to the T1, the one regarding schools, in the last UPWP committee meeting, it was mentioned that may also fit in with the Safe Routes to School initiative by the state, and so to the extent that gets a lower priority, that would be the reason, as opposed to people not thinking that this is something good to do. So, all right, John McQueen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just to opine, I guess, on the T1, T2, and was it T4? On T1, I guess I would say it's a valid problem, but I don't think it's really going to get us much, because we're going right to the solution without really having gotten to the source of the problem. And I think that's the motivations that are prevailing among the parents doing the driving. You really have to address them to understand the dimensions of their problems and their reasons for doing it. I mean, it could be anything from a lot of bike and ped accidents, collisions, could be child predators out there, big in the news. Could be anything from mom's psychological need for justifying why she's staying at home and not working, and why she's a stay-at-home mom. You know, just things like that. But there's a lot more there as to versus going with the solutions of bike racks and things like that. We've done a lot, I think, with some of those the streets. Was it Safe Streets with the walking school bus and things like that, human school bus. But I think we've got to really if you want things to change, you've really got to be able to address the mom's motivations. I think that's number one. So if that's not included in that, which would make it a bigger study or a different study, I don't know if you're really going to get what you really need. On T2, yep, I think it's good in terms of the community connections. But again, I think one of the things that needs to be analyzed or identified really coming out of the study are the reasons for usage and non-usage. You know, what's working and what's not working. It's a bigger population of non-users, and really getting to the core of, where do things start falling apart? It's a nice concept. People might buy into it, but is it just because it doesn't go to enough places, enough destinations, even outside, let's say the hospital area that might be in another town, things like that. But I think you need to identify what that area's, obstacles to usage are. And T4, it's good. But it's too big, too expensive, too ill-defined, I think, for it to really be actionable. That's just my 2 cents.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, I'm just getting back to the screen with everyone here, because I'm just operating on one laptop today, and so I'm a little limited in what I can see. Anna Christina?
Sorry, I forgot which designation it was, but there was one about electrifying the transit system, electrification. I did want to see that pushed up, but also M1, I'm not sure why we're supporting parking studies. I mean, it would seem to me if these facilities are going to be major hubs or employment hubs, or if people are just going temporarily, why there wouldn't be a shuttle from another area. That's it.
Anyone else? All right. So Amira.
Thank you, Len. So just to add support to everything that everyone has said so far, but specifically I want to show support for T4, which was Susan Barrett's study. Even though it is more pricey and everything, I think that for the long term of what we're getting out of it will be beneficial. In regards to the T2 for the community connections, I also agree with John in regards to it's a nice concept. We do want it to work, but I think we need to ask more of the question about sustainability and in the long run of how we're going to make it work and work for us. And want to get the most benefit for what we're putting our studies into right now. I did also want to note that R3, I think, was the MPO support for bus electrification or just the electrification. to answer the previous question, but strongly supporting T4 from our fellow member, Susan Barrett.
Great. Franny?
I just wanted to also add, not knowing how to support them, the ones that Sandy put in. Let me just go back to.
Right.
I would love to hear people talk about those.
Well, my quick comment on those were that those, I think if I recall them, you know, I thought they're all studies that MBTA should do, you know, or pay, you know, the MPO to do, you know. They were very MBTA specific, and whereas I'm here representing the Right Oversight Committee for the MBTA, I mean, I am thinking being regionally, you know, and yes, the MBTA is regional, but still, I mean, I think because it is so specific to the MBTA, you know, I would like to see, you know, the MBTA funded, you know. But they're interesting studies. Sure, so great, worth doing. Yeah. John?
Yeah, hi. I guess back to T4. I mean, I think the content, or the intention rather, is worthy. I mean, it needs to be done, but it's just too, unless you have $1 million for a study in the UPWP or more than that, you aren't going to be able to do it. This is too broad, and it's trying to get everything in one study, which you probably should do in an LRTP. And possibly you could go to the first section of it, perhaps, with kind of a microcosm of T2, which is getting into the gap analysis, what's working, what's not working regionally, and then move on from there and maybe move it into a bigger budget category, sponsor, if you will. I don't think the UPWP can absorb this. It's needed, but you know, they're asking for too much of the ideal in so many different dimensions. It's not going to happen with $100,000 or $200,000.
Yeah.
Well, I think that even with such a big study, I just would say that it can be, if it's organized right, it could chew off a piece and then lead to other studies. I mean, it would be a shame not to start something that's that important just because it's big.
That's why I said go maybe chew off a little piece with doing with what's working and what's not working, a little bit of a gap analysis, and then move on from there with that information. Success factors, perhaps.
All right, you know, well, so when I did the poll, you know, I did notice that the study that I suggested was still in there, and the one that I suggested we replace it with, the one that's just by Logan, I think it was T3 about car sharing, wasn't in. So I know that came up at the end of the last UPWP committee meeting. Did we decide that we wanted to keep that poll the way it had been, or was the decision, you know, not to do that swap? That would be to use very close.
Yeah, I think the reason I kept T5 as it was and didn't add back in car sharing is just because based on some other feedback that we had received from our staff conversations, as well as with OTP, it kind of seemed like there was some hesitation to embark on such a study at this time. So that's why I didn't add the car sharing one back into the polling.
All right. Well, I'm glad I asked. So do you think it's not worth pushing for that one, because it's just that there's just I'm going to run into such a strong no that it's not worth pushing, because I really like that study, you know, and I see so many benefits from it, and especially pertaining to where I think transportation can go with respect to equity, sustainability. There's just so much good for it. So if you're saying don't bother because it's not going to go anywhere, then I'll hear you, and I won't do that, and I'll put my energies elsewhere, you know. So am I oversimplifying your argument or?
No. I think if you would want to advocate for it at the committee meeting next week, I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I just didn't put it in the polling because of what some other feedback that I got, but we can.
I appreciate that and totally respect that. And like I said, I didn't know if it was just a matter of keeping the study, the poll being the same as it had been beforehand, which would make sense too, or if there was some other reason. So, all right, then yeah, I'll keep pushing for it, because there was another related study, a proposal that wasn't I forget where it is on the sheet now, but it had like, look at the regulations, like insurance issues, around car sharing. I was thinking combine those two, and then really study car sharing. Now, I think maybe perhaps a reason for not doing it is that I guess those of us who are really interested in it, can kind of do research on our own. There's certainly a lot of links that were in the proposal where you're like, okay, well, I can go and look and see what happened, with these other entities, and try and tease out, how maybe any given municipality can move forward. But as you know, this is the Regional Transportation Advisory Council, because things like this, I think will only work on a regional basis. It would be hard, I think, to make a car sharing program work if it were only going to exist in Arlington. So we really needed to be available in lots of areas, in the region. So, all right, but once again, I will say that even though I proposed the study being the one for exploring uncertainties, or it was the one to, I guess it was to explore combinations of parameters in the new TDM model. I said, let's pull that one out. And I suggested switching it, with the car sharing one. But even if we don't switch with car sharing, I think that we are doing similar enough work in developing the TDM, the transportation demand model, that is going to get at kind of what I was getting at with that study proposal. So I just assume pull that one out and allow something else to occupy its space. So I'll stop talking now and go to John Queen.
Thanks. Speaking of T5, I liked it. It was simple, it was doable, it was actionable, and it was working off of and expanding on a platform that already is being part of our mantra. And I think it would help just to dimensionalize it. So that, and I just want to put a vote in for A1, going way back to the top in terms of the lane use. It's really a double. I'd modify it and take it out of bike lanes, and I would just put it into double parking, the impacts of double parking. And because not every street is, even an urban street has a bike lane, but the impact, there'll be bicyclists, there'll be pedestrians, and the impacts of whether it's Amazon Prime, UPS, Uber, Lyft, Grubhub, in terms of their disruptions, perhaps, and safety issues, those are real, and those should be, they're increasing. Whereas the geometry of the streets are not. Okay, so that's one. I think it would help give a little bit better context, and especially as we move from the outer core, where there are probably less bike lanes and more just city streets that are getting the double parking for those services. And then going to what was it? T6, Sandy's. Yeah, I buy into that. I think that's a bigger question. I don't know if we have enough money for that, but that's something I think where we've needed to get a better handle on, let's say, the post-COVID world and how the center of gravity has maybe moved out in terms of travel out from the inner core. And what is the new area that we really have to work with demographics. So
Great. And John, I'm going to give you a hard time just because I know you can handle it. But I'm back on the safe routes to school thing. I would love to be a stay-at-home dad, take my kids to school, and have a nice, safe way of getting them there. And so, but yeah, I know what you meant. I'm just giving you a hard time because, like I said, I know you can handle it. Anna Christina?
Really quickly, I do agree with what John said about the double parking. We should do a study on that because it is getting prevalent and very dangerous in certain situations, especially, I don't know, up here, there are some areas that are kind of country roads that I've gone on. And when you have double parking on a country road, it is dangerous because there's a curve every, 20 feet. So it should be studied. The other thing I wanted to say was, Len, I don't know if you're aware, but most car manufacturers are looking into creating clubs for car sharing. So you don't have to, it's supposed to be a little bit more clean and you have a maintenance system. So it would be a fee, but you could look into what they're doing as far as car sharing. And I don't know if there's going to be a public service car sharing, maybe somewhere down the line, but I think it might be too early to put any money into that kind of a study. We should see what happens as it's becoming more prevalent. That's it.
Okay, well, I'll come back and respond to that, but I see Franny's hand up. So Franny?
I was just wondering how this information is used by the MPO board and also how they make the decision about these the reason I'm asking is having recently sort of become more familiar with exactly how ranked choice voting works. I'm realizing that would be a great thing for us to try one of these years. And when we have these long lists of things, why don't we try ordering them and seeing how a ranked choice vote algorithm would respond to what we all said. And does the MPO, I mean, I just have this fear. I haven't been to that many MPO meetings, but what's the method by which they take this input and by way they choose the final studies? Sure. Or is it the staff taking input from them and from, what is the method?
Sure. Well, I'll let Shaleka respond to that if she wants. I mean, I can certainly say something about that, having been on the committee for a while and being on the board and representing the advisory council. But I will say that the poll that that they gave us a link to take, did allow us to rank, all the studies, and so we are implementing that system. So Shaleka.
Yeah, thank you. So the way that we are collecting your feedback and the way that we are putting your feedback into action is through this RTAC recommended list. I will be presenting that list to the UPWP committee next week, along with the staff recommended list, and I'm meeting with staff tomorrow to develop our internal list. I present both of these to the committee along with the results of the survey that they took, and essentially say, here is the input that we got from staff, from RTAC, and this is how you all voted. Please make your decision. So your input is definitely being put directly into the decision-making process here.
And so let me quickly ask you, Shaleka, because I often don't pay attention to whom the mail that I get, most of the mail I get is addressed. So was it only MPO board members or UPWP committee members that got the poll to rank the studies, or did also members of the advisory council get that poll?
It was just for members of the UPWP committee.
Okay, all right. So that's why then Franny wasn't aware of the ability to rank the studies. So okay, gotcha. Okay, John.
I'd like to put a vote in, I guess, for T3. I think that's been a long overdue issue. And I think we might be able to, it's simple, it's actionable, and I think we might be able to glean from that some of the obstacles to transit use that people have is the interchangeability of fares, structures, and things like that. So I think it's valuable.
Can I respond to John?
Sure.
I marked that one as I really liked it, but I wanted to make sure we didn't just study it. I really would love if it, well, these are all about studies, but that there was an element of implementation that went on, because I feel like we have to move into implementation soon. That's all.
Well, I think
but
that
I
would
agree
be
that
coming,
that's really important.
that would be coming out of their indicated actions, I think, of the report. So.
Well, Tegan had her hand up. She put it down. And I sometimes don't like it when people come back to me after I put my hand down. It's like, well, I put my hand down. so Tegan, you don't have to talk if you don't want to.
I feel like you all moved on, though. I just wanted to layer on, I think very implicitly, or very much part of what Shalika said, but I feel like I can emphasize a little bit more, is that the voting of sort of which studies seem the most interesting or relevant is really only one of many factors that we have to take into account. And I think that bears repeating, because it seems like, you know, some kind of weighted ranking system could lead to very concrete results, but that's not the full set of information we need to be able to work with the committee to finalize which studies make sense to go forward with. I think Len already mentioned this earlier today, but some of these studies ideas can be incorporated into other work we do. Some of them are really important work that should be done, but either maybe we're not quite the right agency to be doing it, or it's not the right time to work with another agency to do it. Just want to remind everybody that the voting is a part of this and an important part of your input, but so is the qualitative kind of conversation you're having, as well as a number of other factors we try to bring to the table. I think that was all very implicit, Shalika, in what you were saying, but I like to kind of keep reminding folks of just the complexity that goes into trying to navigate the decisions for which of these specific discrete studies that we do.
Yep. So, and as Shalika mentioned, I mean, the staff will recommend studies, and then we have what comes out of all these discussions. And then, of course, the biggest factor is how much money do we have to spend, and how much money do the studies cost, and so as we get closer to the decision making process, we start getting numbers associated with all the studies, and then we try to we essentially do as many studies as we can, our priorities, so there we are, so any other
just
comments?
really quickly, I'm wondering why some of the estimated budgets are not listed. Does that mean those studies are likely off the table no matter what, or?
No, the only studies with an estimated budget listed are those that submitted one. Essentially, staff did not really have time to scope out budgets for all of the studies that were suggested ahead of developing this universe. So that doesn't mean that they're inherently off the table. It just means that we didn't have time to scope it out.
Okay, thanks.
And also, I mean, one of the, I guess, necessary shortcomings, I use that word lightly, in the process for me, is that we don't really have a good sense of the scope of the studies, as we are selecting amongst them. I mean, we have a general sense of what the study will do, but as far as a well-defined scope, we don't have that. And I mean, I understand why. I mean, it takes time to really develop the scopes. And in a universe as big as the one that we have now, which I am thrilled for. I mean, and even if you cut out like 20 of them, which were just like suggestions or so, that would still leave us a good 50 or so studies to develop a well-defined scope. It would just take a lot of time to do that, but that's when you can really get a sense of what the study can do. And that, I think at that point, you really get a good sense of what the study is going to cost. But in a world where there are necessary uncertainties, we just do the best we can, and so far I think we've been doing a good job. I'll say that there have been studies that have made it through to approval that I haven't been enthusiastic about, but then when I see the work program for them at the board meetings, like, wow, that's pretty good. So there hasn't been one yet that has gone through that I've gone like, we shouldn't do that. So John.
Yeah, I guess wanted to remind us that the budget that we have in total is also going to be allocated on an ongoing basis to some regular studies that are already earmarked. So that's further diminished in terms of what the availability is for our limited funds.
Yeah.
All well spent, though.
Yeah. Franny?
I wanted to talk about TE too. The transit equity. It's hard to have a lot of things. It's like we're in a candy store, you know. I would like to see all of these studies. It seems so important to look at where workers are trying to get to, and so I really like that study also.
Yeah. Yeah, that one, you know, that was the most extensive study proposal I've seen. You know, it was really quite impressive. You know, I did have a little problem sometimes wrapping my brain around what it was going to study, you know, in detail. But overall, I mean, I certainly agree with the thrust of it and what it's aiming at. You know, and I always just kept getting the feeling that maybe there were other studies that were doing parts of it, but then with something so big, you know, maybe that is likely to be the case anyways. But I can get behind it, you know. So.
Yeah, I also would love if Stella would sort of talk to us about what you like about your study too.
Right.
I don't know if there was more than one, but I was just looking at.
Yeah, well, hey, you know what? Let's bring out the proponents. You know.
Yeah, I mean, you're on their list.
Yeah.
A lot of the people in the room.
And maybe even Logan. But look, I know that you all weren't prepared to do this, so if you don't want to talk, you don't have to talk about your study, okay? And it won't reflect negatively on your study. You know, so.
Yeah, I'm happy to say a couple words
Sure.
about my proposal. I put it together with our resiliency and air quality planner, Judy Taylor. And the goal was kind of to set a foundation for some of the really sort of targeted and focused engagement we want to do to environmental stakeholders in the next couple of years. So yeah, sort of laying the groundwork for that, really putting together, you know, a robust list of contacts and building relationships, and also sort of, you know, assessing what the sort of desire and need is for the MPO's role to be in this space, and how we can kind of support that as staff as well. So I think it's certainly work that, you know, will be wrapped up into both the engagement and resiliency programs as it kind of gets off the ground. But we really wanted to kind of carve out space to get it started and lay that groundwork for building those relationships.
Thanks, Stella.
Thanks. It's great to hear your background. It makes me think in future years, wouldn't it be nice to have everybody do a little elevator pitch about the study that they proposed?
There you go. You know, hey, well, maybe that is something that we could do at advisory council meeting. You know, maybe if it required either a longer meeting or an extra meeting. You know, Logan.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll talk about the Community Connections shuttle study T2 real quick. So as the capital programming planner, I am in charge of administrating the Community Connections program and eventually the Transit Modernization program with the help of Ethan. Shuttles are obviously part of the Community Connections program, and they take up a big actual funding chunk of it as well too. So it is a pretty big part of the Community Connections program, and we've been operating for a couple of years now. We do have a shuttle guidebook out that kind of gives people who are interested in looking at shuttles, you know, an idea of what kind of the shuttle requirements need to be able to apply for the Community Connections program. Also gives a kind of overview of other shuttle programs that are offered within the state that you can get funding for. But I think one of the parts that I've kind of noticed coming into this position, I've only been here for almost a year now, next month. But one of the kind of things that I've noticed is the shuttle program. It definitely has some gaps, and we are still trying to figure out like the fine contours of it. We've had about 8 different shuttle services so far within the pilot program's launch. I believe 1 is officially ending next year, and that will bring us back down to 7. but they have various different programs, various sizes. It's a mix, it's a real big mix of, different programs. So this study would be intended to, kind of pull all that data together and put it into one place for stakeholders to kind of look at, especially the board, because, we did recently, a couple months ago, have a couple extra chats about like the Canton shuttles. Newton also came in with their Pneumo shuttle to kind of give the board an update about their ridership levels. Since the pandemic, ridership estimates have changed as well too. So this study, yeah, it was more of an overview of like gap analysis, where we can improve, and also too, I think the emissions part about it is a really big part. The Community Connections program is funded through CMAQ funding, climate mitigation, or I'm just going to say CMAQ. I don't know the acronym right off the top of my head.
That's fine.
But one of the big parts of getting that funding is proving a net carbon decrease, or a net greenhouse emissions decrease. So that is a really important part of the shuttle program. And I think, part of this study would be getting a lot of that greenhouse data together, and kind of, giving an overview and seeing how effective these programs are at actually, reducing carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, but also just in terms of like, usability and ridership, what are the cost of these programs, to the MPO itself. So yeah, that was my quick elevator pitch. Happy to answer any questions. Sorry, I'm purple, by the way. My camera's a little messed up today, but.
I think it's cool, Logan. I like it a lot. And I won't ask you to talk about the car sharing as much as I love that study, but I think I'm just gonna go in fighting for it all by myself. It's okay. So Franny.
I just wanted to say that the outcome of studies like that, Logan, are so important. When 17 years ago, when I first started getting involved with trying to start a shuttle in the Acton area, we depended a lot. There was one study, I don't remember, I think it was MAPC, it could have been from CTPS. There was a study, what makes an effective local shuttle or whatever it was. It was a study, and just that was sort of my Bible a little bit at first. I still remember things like frequency and reliability and a big splash when you start them. And there were lessons there that I still remember and use to today. So that kind of study can really lead to good best practice sharing.
Yeah, I think it might have been an MPO, guidebook. They certainly have a few of them, which are good, very helpful. One of the things I think the MPO does well. So Stella, I don't have my agenda up. So how are we on time?
We should have about 15 minutes before we want to transition into the tip discussion.
Thanks. And we don't have to use all that time, folks. So if there's nothing more to say, we can move on. But at the same time, if there's more to say, happy to hear it. Derek Pravat here, he is the chair of the UPWP committee.
Yes.
Hi, Derek.
Hi, Len.
Yeah.
Thanks for the shout out.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So folks were asking earlier, and if you want to chime in on this yourself, which studies we select, I think we got good answers from Shalika and Tegan, but I don't think you were here. So maybe it's not a good idea to ask you to chime in. But
that's okay. Yeah, I apologies for being late. But yeah, I did have a good call this week with some folks in the Office of Transportation Planning about the proposed universe of studies, and I think we have some dots and informed my ranking survey as well. So,
sure.
But yeah, I think we'll have a fuller discussion at the next UPWP committee meeting, but this is all great input as well.
Well, I'll just prepare you. I will be doing a lot of begging for that car sharing program. I'll negotiating my little head off to get that one. So until you say no. Once you say no, man, it's never going to happen. Then I'll shut up and go, okay, fine. So,
okay.
All right.
Yeah, well, see how it all shakes out.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So,
All
righty.
If I could just jump in really quickly. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but if it's possible, do you think you and the members could come up with like a top 5 list of studies, and that could be like the RTAC recommended list, or whichever way you prefer, but is there a way to sort of like finalize which studies you would be in favor of?
Well, let's give it a whirl. So all right, folks, want to come up with the top 5?
You want to put out a Survey Monkey and have people fill it themselves and send it to you?
I think we have until tomorrow, right? No, I guess we have until the 20th, right? I mean, so
yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we do the Survey Monkey? I think that's good.
When do you want the data? I know you want it today, ideally. But next to the ideal, when would you want it?
By Tuesday.
Okay.
Next Tuesday.
All right.
In the morning, so I can share it with the committee.
Right.
Before.
So then maybe in order to make things easier for you, do you think you can maybe just send the poll that was sent to the UPWT committee members, and just tell me, and I'll just tell my colleagues here, and you just need to do the top 5. Would that work for you, Shalika, or would you prefer something different?
We could do. I think we can do that. Yeah.
Okay, if I prefer something different, that's fine. I mean, otherwise we could just tell folks, look, just give you top 5 out of the sheet that Stella sent us, and certainly but I tell you what, even though we prefer to do the Survey Monkey and have a little more time, let's just say we had to do it now. What would we come up with now? And we're just going to use this as like a straw poll, and we'll do the other inputs, by Tuesday. But John, give it a try. If that's what you have us up for.
Well, sort of, I guess it was to frame what we would, if we were going to do the Survey Monkey, if it would be the universe that we discussed today, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not going way back upstream.
No, just 18.
So do we have to like?
But it would include car sharing, right?
Well, well, it's not. I'm gonna have to do that one outside of the process, we'll see. So anyways,
It might be interesting to actually put that into a ranked system, because if we, we don't have to think, well, I'm not going to vote for this one because nobody else will, and it will be wasting my vote. So it could be, I just really got how to do it the other day. So it would be sort of interesting to look at the results. Are you going to do them?
I'm sorry to interrupt. So when you say you really got how to do it, you mean that doing it in ranked?
Yeah, how to take all the votes, look at them,
right?
Determine which ones to move on to their second vote, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So then maybe we can just forward them that poll. I don't know if you can separate out the output, because if your concern is that you're going to have all this other input that it's not the input that you want, and I can understand the resistance to doing that.
Just so I understand it, I will send over the survey that the same survey that I sent to staff and to the committee. We did it in Qualtrics. I'll send that out, and that basically allows you to kind of drag and drop the options to order them from 1 to 18. 1 being the highest, like this is your top priority, and 18 being your lowest priority. Now, if I send that out, say end of day today, early tomorrow, I would need time to process those results and then get them back to you all so that it makes sense. And then there would not be time for another meeting to discuss those results before next week. So we could do that. I can also see if I can do a quick poll in Zoom right now that you can take during the meeting. if that would be helpful.
Well, what I would suggest is just sending, I mean, so it's understood that we're not going to do another meeting. I mean, and so you would just take the data that you get, I mean, and that's it. I mean, and then I guess what you could do is we can then look at what we get and add in the conversation that we've had. I mean, kind of like we do in the UPWP committee meetings anyways. Like we take the input of the poll, but that's just one factor. I mean, so now you've had this discussion, I mean, you've listened to the discussion. I mean, we do the rankings. Whoever wants to do the rankings. You see what pops out, and you see how that kind of meshes with the conversation we had here, and that just becomes the advisory council's recommendation. I mean, and if you want to run it by me as a chair, I mean, I'll be happy to look at it. I mean, and then kind of say as the chair at the UPWP committee meetings, I mean, I stand by this, or I'll say, well, this is what the poll says versus what I recall from the meeting, and this is how I think my colleagues on the council would want to propose their list of studies.
Did you?
Does that make sense? Did that make sense, Rebecca?
I think so.
So that's okay.
Wondering,
all right.
I was wondering, you said you could
again.
do a Zoom poll right now during this meeting?
Yeah, I can send out like a Zoom poll. I mean, I could truly send out the survey as well, drop it in the link. And if you are able to take the survey in the next 15 minutes, right, we can come back to it at the end of the meeting if that works for members.
Sure. I would have a hard time putting in order all 18 right now in the course of this meeting.
All right. So then
I'd love to be able to do it after.
Yeah, let's do it after the meeting, and we'll synthesize a list and without having another meeting. Okay, Shalika, that'll be on me. And so let folks meet. Let's have folks like complete the survey. Today is Wednesday. You got to complete the survey by Friday. Is that good enough, Shalika?
Yeah, Friday noon would be great.
Yeah, Friday noon. You know, so.
Are you gonna drop the link here?
We're gonna email it out.
Oh, you're gonna email, okay.
Yeah. So Friday noon. You know.
Thank you so much.
Then we can talk, Shalika, figure things out. Okay.
Sure.
But glad to see people want to engage on that level. So we'll do our best to accommodate, So Stella, how are we on time? And then we'll go to John and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes
to
transition to the tip.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, John.
Yeah, I guess I would encourage folks when they go back and take a look at the full list, is to reconsider how big what the deliverable and the real answers that they want out of the proposed study. And some of these are just huge. I mean, they're worthy and great information, but they're just huge. For instance, T4. I mean, it's great. You need to have it, but it's just too big a study to accomplish within even the entire UPWP budget. So I mean and there should be a clear identification of the problem to be solved and the objective to be achieved, and then get into the method too. Too often they're going in straight into the solution without really having to find the problem that really needs to be solved. So I think have a personal filter, I guess, in terms of the size of the budget that might be available, kind of maybe work as 80 grand, Srika, maybe as the top end of somebody having a budget available to them. And because having fielded enough research on my own, well, not my own, in corporations, 50 grand doesn't really go a long way if it's a really ambitious study. 100,000 doesn't go a long way. So just bear that in mind of what's affordable, what you want to get, and is it actionable?
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. So that's gonna be the last word on this topic. So look forward to an email from Shalika, and appreciate you being here, Shalika, Derek, and as always, so it's fun figuring out the studies that are going to go into UPWP. It's not as much fun as figuring out the projects that are going to go into the tip, but it's close, I'm saying. And I'm saying that for Ethan's sake, because right now Ethan's coming on board, so Ms. Lapointe, please take it away.
Thanks, Len. I do have some slides for this presentation. So good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of this part of the presentation is to cover some updates and revisions to the Transportation Improvement Program's approved scenario, approved in this case meaning approved by the MPO board at the March 30th MPO board meeting. There have been some amendments here, but if we go on to the next slide, I can cover kind of a run of the presentation, starting with basically looking at what the final funding scenario entails as far as what new projects are included, what the next steps are, namely with regard to tomorrow's MPO board presentation on April 13th, and also next week's release of a draft TIP inclusive of all of the chapters of the TIP, and also the projects on April 20th. And then also just wrap this up with a discussion around what is contained within the scenarios, what kind of priorities these scenarios represent, goals, objectives, and some of the challenges that may have been encountered during the TIP development process. Starting off with some project updates, if we go on to the next slide, and the one after that, just to look at some MBTA projects. Given funding availability in federal fiscal year 2024 and 2025 during the initial stages of scenario development for the TIP, MPO staff reached out to multiple contacts throughout the region, including the MBTA, MassDOT, and RTAs as well, and also municipalities, I should mention, to solicit projects that were sufficiently ready, shovel ready effectively to utilize this funding. Right now, in the current federal fiscal year 2023 to 2027 TIP, the MPO has currently funded both the MBTA's Forest Hills Reconstruction Project and Lynn Station projects in 2024. That's as of the current TIP. The MBTA also brought forward a request for 4 additional projects that could be constructed as early as federal fiscal year 2024. These included 2 station accessibility projects on the MBTA Orange Line, one being at Mass Ave Station for $35.4 million, and one at Jackson Square Station for accessibility upgrades at $21 million. These amounts reflecting the federal cost share on the projects, not the all-in amounts. The third project is a catch-all for the MBTA's new rail transformation program. This represents additional action items that were not captured within the MBTA's capital investment plan that could be funded through the MPO's investments. These specifically being improvements to the siding at Wilbur Interlocking, which is a location on the Lowell line in between, roughly near the Woburn station, and also improvements to add a new turn track at Reading Station. These improvements would facilitate additional upgrades to reduce conflicts between freight, rail, and also the Amtrak Downeaster to better coordinate commuter rail traffic and potentially increase peak or minimum headways on the Haverhill and Lowell lines down from 40 minutes at current peak times to 30 minutes. And the fourth project is a familiar project, and that is the Columbus Avenue bus lanes phase 2. The MPO has historically provided funding not only to phase 1 of the Columbus Avenue bus lane project, but also last year the phase 2 component. The funding requested this year from the MBTA and also the city of Boston, in fact, is meant to cover additional connections that the city is looking to make along with the MBTA between not only Columbus Avenue in Boston, but also where Columbus Avenue makes linkages to the Jackson Square, Roxbury Crossing, and Ruggles T stops. This extension extending the Columbus Ave bus lanes from their current terminus at Jackson Square to Ruggles, effectively running parallel to the existing Orange Line. So with that, if we go on to the next slide, we can start moving into what is being referred to as Scenario 5 with amendments. Scenario 5 was the scenario that the MPO board selected on March 30th, and the board made some requests and motions during that discussion to amend additional projects and funding amounts onto different line items in the TIP. Starting off with the Community Connections Program, Scenario 5 amended included the addition of 7 new community connections projects, including 1 returning project. I should also mention this also incorporates ongoing funding obligations for currently programmed shuttle projects. The new shuttle project with scenario 5 is the Catch Connect Microtransit Shuttle Expansion Phase 2 project, which is an expansion on Metro West RTA's existing shuttle service to improve shuttle accessibility between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. on weekdays in Framingham and Natick to address off-peak demand times, mostly for various workforces in that area. On the subject of bus and transit travel, the transit signal priority project that was selected this year was on Broad Street in Lynn. And there were 4 projects awarded between 2 municipalities, the first being for Medford's Blue Bikes expansion, also a bicycle parking tier 1 project in Medford to install 40 new bike racks, and 2 bike rack projects in Canton, at Canton Center for that commuter rail station, and also at 3 different public schools throughout the town of Canton to provide bicycle racks for students. In addition, 1 project was also reprogrammed. Acton's parking management system project had initially been awarded funding back in federal fiscal year 2022 to the amount of $20,000, but staffing changes in the police department over the town of Acton meant that the project could not be executed in that year. It has been reprogrammed in federal fiscal year 2024 at the request of the town of Acton for $15,000. There are also 2 additional community connections projects, but I will get into that later this presentation. On the next slide, I'll discuss a little bit in more detail what scenario 5 really encompassed. The foundation of scenario 5 was based on the scoring scenario, scenario 2, meaning that scenario 5 began by prioritizing projects that had scored the highest during MPO staff's evaluations earlier this winter, namely in March and February. Primarily, scenario 5 funded new projects in federal fiscal year 2028, but also more aggressively funded projects in the near years, 24, 5, and also 2027, compared to other scenarios presented towards the board. This entailed funding more projects, but by programming more projects, lowered unprogrammed balances, which would therefore have allocated additional contingency. This led to an outcome of 22 new projects being funded by the MPO, including on the next slide, some of those MBTA projects that I mentioned earlier. So first off, the Forest Hills Reconstruction Project was actually removed from the TIP by recommendations from the MBTA when the MPO obligated funding for, or rather programmed funding for the Forest Hills Station project in 2024. That was done with the understanding that other source contributions to facilitate that project would still be available. However, due to inflationary pressures on those sources of funding, the funding was basically no longer available to complete the project, and the MPO's contribution was effectively insufficient to allow for the execution of the contract and is therefore being deprogrammed. That said, that is being offset with the programming of 3 new projects in federal fiscal years 24 and 25. Excuse me. The first being Jackson Square Station's accessibility project at a federal cost of $21 million, programmed with $11 million in 2024 and $10 million in 2025, split between 2 years, and also the rail transformation early action items at Wilbur Interlocking and Reading Station, both of those 2 locations. Those 2 locations combined amount to a funding request of $11.2 million. As I will get to later in this presentation, some of these items may be subject to change given new developments that have emerged since March 30th, but I'll discuss that shortly. And also the programming of the additional funding request for the Columbus Avenue bus lane phase 2 project with a federal ask of $9.4 million. This would leave $7.9 million in federal fiscal year 2024, the first year of the TIP, which is also the most important year of the TIP in terms of contingency, to function as cost coverage. That's about 6.1% of overall funding levels. On the next slide, just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier on community connections, their scenario 5 differed from other scenarios presented in that it not only continued the existing shuttle obligations and funded Metro West Microtransit expansion project, in addition to the reprogramming of Acton parking management, but it also programmed 2 additional bike share projects not accounted for in other scenarios. This was $1.37 million for the City of Boston and City of Cambridge to do procurement for e-bikes as part of the existing bike share system for Blue Bikes. effectively allowing the city of Boston and Cambridge to move towards their current goal of approximately 10% of the existing Blue Bikes fleet being pedal assist electrified effectively. This funding only being for the procurement of those bikes and spare batteries, not for any system expansion, unlike the Medford project, which would add 4 stations. These projects were not initially considered in the scenarios presented previously due to fiscal constraint within the Community Connections program, that $2.5 million set aside, but also some considerations regarding the readiness of the Blue Bikes General Council, a status that adjusted obviously as the March 30th meeting neared. With that, onto the other capital projects. Scenario 5 also incorporated some new line items. If we go on to the next slide, please. Starting off with, on the subject of bike share, a new bike share state of good repair or support line item beginning in 2025 and continuing into 2028. This bike share support project would effectively allow for additional funding for Blue Bikes, not only for the current system, but also to make expansion of the system further out of the inner core more feasible. Starting off with $1 million per fiscal year in 2025, continuing into 26, and then escalating to $2 million in 27 and 8, based on a recommendation that will also be found in the LRTP, the long range plan there. The logic here is that this funding would not only help to support expansion of the system, but would also facilitate state of good repair improvements to existing bike share stations, many of which are reaching their 10-year end of their useful lives, especially within the inner core municipalities. These kinds of state of good repair investments potentially enabling some of these municipalities that already have bike share or that may be looking to invest in expansion into their community, just to make their investment in it pencil out in terms of financing operations costs. In addition, one of the amendments made to scenario 5 was the extension of a project design support pilot up from an initial amount of $1.5 million to $4 million. This design support pilot being a pilot project to fund project design for various municipalities across the region and would be subject to competitive applications by said municipalities alongside other investment programs within the TIP. In addition, there were MassDOT projects, or I should say, projects that MassDOT's Highway Division brought before the Board of Directors, the MPO's board, for consideration. This one first being Chelsea's targeted safety improvements and related work project from William Street to City Hall Avenue. This project was funded in full by MassDOT in that year, but that funding obligation has been shifted over to the MPO. In federal fiscal year 2026, Boston's Cambridge Street over MBTA project was funded in the amount of approximately $16.6 million. This is the bridge that carries Cambridge Street over the Orange Line and Amtrak right beneath I-93 in Charlestown. And the bridge is just a bridge preservation job such that the bridge may remain in a state of good repair in advance of the upcoming major capital projects like Rutherford Avenue and McGrath Highway nearby. Go to the next slide for federal fiscal year 2027. There are 3 new projects, the first being Malden Spot Pond Brook Greenway, an on-road shared use path project, and a new project that was brought forward by MassDOT but was not previously funded, Everett's targeted multimodal safety improvements on Route 16. This is a near-term improvement for federal fiscal year 2027 in the amount of approximately $5 million total, all in, that $4.7 million representing present day costs, in addition to a $15 million MPO contribution in federal fiscal year 2027 only for the Bowker Overpass Bridge replacement near Storrow Drive. The total cost of that project being in excess of about $115 million, and the MPO's contribution just being complementary to it as part of this scenario. Then moving on for federal fiscal year 2027 still, there is also a reconsideration for a currently programmed project. If we go on to that slide. This would be the McGrath Highway reconstruction and boulevard construction rather for that project. Large capital projects like McGrath Highway, and as I'll get to Rutherford Avenue, have a cost requirement or expectation set by the MPO for programming where they cannot be funded in full in a given year, and therefore are AC'd or advanced constructed over the course of several years based on their funding distribution. In order to make it so that in future TIP development cycles, there's more funding available for new projects later out, the AC schedule for McGrath Highway has been rebalanced to front load some of those costs in 2027. Initially, McGrath Highway was programmed for $20 million of construction in 2027 and has been increased based on the MPO board's vote up to $35 million. 2028 will be $30 million, and that $15 million increase did not change the budget of the project, but did lower the amount expected for funding in 2029 and 2030, again, just to open up that funding bandwidth for the 25-29 tip or the 26-30 tips. In addition, the Rutherford Avenue project, which at the previous RTAC meeting I mentioned was recommended for delay from federal fiscal year 25 to 28, has been moved up 1 year to 2027 with $8.6 million to start mobilizing for the project and begin preliminary construction in that year, in addition to $33.5 million in 2028. Funding for that project, namely the ongoing obligations from the MPO, will continue all the way into 2032 for a total estimated project budget of about $196 million, of which $25 million is being contributed by the city of Boston. So with that, that brings us to our last year, federal fiscal year 2028. These three projects in this federal fiscal year are similar to the scenarios that were presented initially to the MPO board on March 16th and also then on March 30th again. These are the same three projects, being Natick-Cochituate Rail Trail Extension, which ties into the currently under construction, soon to be completed Natick Center MBTA commuter rail station, Wakefield's Envision Wakefield Comprehensive Downtown Transportation Improvement Project, that project being a complete streets project meant to calm traffic, improve pedestrian accessibility, and add in shared use paths for Wakefield's component of the Mystic Highlands Greenway, in addition to Westwood, primarily Westwood's project as it was the proponent, reconstruction of Canton Street project to install sidewalks and a shared use path along Canton Street near the Route 128 University Park, MBTA commuter rail, and Amtrak station. With all of this in mind, including the amendments requested by the MPO board for scenario 5, that brings us onto the next slide to show where that scenario left the MPO in terms of unprogrammed funding. The total amount of programmed funds across all 5 years of the 2024 to 28 tip under this scenario was $677 million, very different, $184,474. I should mention this scenario presented here is actually different from the one presented at the March 30th meeting. That reason being that additional inflation contingencies were factored into project costs in order to arrive at this final amount. With that programming of that $677 million, that left unprogrammed funding amounts of $7.9 million, that first nearest most important year in 2024, $1.5 million approximately in 2025, $618,446 in 2026, about $2.2 million in 27, and $8.2 million in 2028. That is where the scenario stands now. However, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, if we go on to the next slide, this is still subject to change. There will be further discussion around this scenario, especially with regard to contingency amounts at the April 13th board meeting. For example, the amount of match allocated and programmed for MBTA projects will increase and impact the amount of regional target that is held in reserve for those years. And in tandem, the amount of federal fiscal year 2025 transit modernization funding may also decrease to offset those increases, effectively trying to hit that target of transit modernization funding for MPO investments based on the LRTP. Right now, transit modernization is set at about a target of 5%, but is currently at around about 15% of total overall allocations. Not that that's necessarily a problem, but just note to make. Also, in addition, project costs change over time for currently programmed projects. And one such project in this scenario did witness a cost change after the March 30th meeting that will be discussed at tomorrow's MPO board meeting on April 13th. That will, of course, impact what this scenario looks like. Just to reiterate as well, the first year of the TIP is most important for contingency because projects programmed in fiscal year 2024 will advertise for construction and be obligated against in the nearest term, meaning by the time we get to the development of the federal fiscal year 2025 to 29 TIP, there are sufficient moving parts that the picture will also look different again a year from now, and we'll have to readjust accordingly. That's all part of the cycle. So with that, that was a lot of information in a fairly condensed fashion. On the next slide, I'd just like to take us into discussion where I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify any information here.
I'm going to go quickly first. Can you back up to, I think it's the first fiscal year, the one with the Forest Hills? So yeah, so it was 6.4 million that's coming from the MPO, right?
Yes, it was 6.4 million from the MPO, and about, I think the total estimated project cost initially was at around 80 to 90 million.
Oh, I see. So what we're getting at is like, how much more did it go up, and how much more would the MPO have needed to put in? Because it seems like we're subbing in.
My recollection, and this was based on some materials provided, was that it was the funding request that would have had to have been made to the MPO board was in excess of all of the total reserve funding in federal fiscal year 24 and 25.
Yeah.
That reserve funding being about $60 million.
Okay.
So it would have been above that.
Yeah, fine. I mean, I'm sure that was said me back on March 30th. I wasn't recalling, so thank you. The benefit of having you at these meetings is that sometimes it takes multiple times for me to hear before I get it. So, so fortunately, I have that opportunity here. So thank you, Ethan. So I'll open up to my colleagues here. Anna Christina.
On that note, I don't know if I missed something, but I am wondering. This kind of goes back to the UPWP study for T7, which was Sandy's idea to look at construction costs. But I'm looking at this, I think it was the one for, is it Peabody? I mean, it looks like it went from like 6 million to 15 million. And I'm wondering, do we get an explanation of why, or do you know why? Do you get the explanation of why?
Yes, that's a very good question because that did come up during the March 30th meeting. In the case of both of those Peabody projects, actually, because there were two for the Independence Greenway, one that I think went from 3.5 to 7-ish, and one that went from about 6 or 7 to about 15. In the case of that project, this goes back to an earlier discussion around 25% designs, where many of these projects were not submitted to MPO staff for consideration or MassDOT before a 25% design submission had been completed. Therefore, as these projects moved through their design life cycles, not only did additional components need to be added in, for example, in Peabody, with that project, there had to be additional culverts constructed to accommodate drainage along the embankments, but it led to more refined cost estimates. Also factor in that over time, as those projects, when they may have been initially programmed several years ago to now, there have been cases, for example, I know in terms of coring, gravel, and other forms of fill, over 100% cost increases on certain kinds of material used.
No, I don't disagree. I've always said that programming any funds while something's in a 25% design is kind of silly, because by the time you get to 90% design, it's always like quadrupled the cost. But that's a big jump within a year for next year. And you said that Forest Hill station, that's been defunded, so that money will move into this, would you say? I mean, are people increasing the cost? Are they shifting the cost? Or like, I guess I'm asking to see an itemized bill, really, what changed from the 25% to the 60%? I assume you're at the 60% design phase.
I believe most recently the project hit 75%, but I can verify exactly what happened there. We did have the project managers present at the March 30th meeting to discuss further, along with folks from MassDOT's Highway Division, to answer those questions. With regard to the Forest Hills funding, that $6.4 million of funding was actually used to finance some of the new MBTA projects. One of the distinctions I would like to make between Forest Hills and these new MBTA projects is that the MBTA projects will be funded in full by the MPO. So unlike with Forest Hills, there's no worry per se about other sources of funding, for lack of a better term, backing out, therefore requiring the MPO to de-invest as well. It's basically all in for the MPO. If the MPO does not fund these projects, they do not have another funding source within the capital investment plan by the MBTA.
Okay, I mean, that answers my question. I guess the last part of it is any of this money, extra money that's been allocated from the IIJA, or is that you don't get that? That's not MPO money?
A large amount of that money was actually programmed as part of last year's TIP, which was an increase of about, I want to say 19%, ranging from 19 to 21%. This current TIP reflects that increase and carries all of those projects programmed last year forward. In fact, the passage of the IIJA was part of why those MBTA projects were funded, because it presented a significant amount of funding availability in the earlier years. What really drove a lot of the availability this year was a different policy change with regard to the cessation of payments on the next, I'm going to confuse this. I want to say it's the Accelerated Bridge Program for basically debt service payments on that, which conclude in 2027, I believe. That led to an additional funding availability of about $30 million per year in 2027 and 8 versus what we anticipated in the last TIP.
That was it. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Quick time check, Stella, please.
Yeah, I believe we have about 6 minutes left.
Okay,
for this
great.
discussion.
All right. Any comments? I mean, so maybe that's when you can drop the presentation. We can bring it back up if people want. So, well, I'll just say that initially, when we were discussing scenarios, I went for a scenario that reserved more funds. I felt that Eric Barraza from APC made a compelling argument for keeping less reserve funds so that we could program more, because we would be programming projects that were scored and we had aligned those projects with the goals of the MPO via the LRT, the Long Range Restoration Plan. And so I thought that was a good argument, because what happens is when we don't have enough projects programmed, then MassDOT and MBTA come to us with projects that they want us to fund. And yes, indeed, they have good, reliable scoring processes, with criteria that are compelling, and we all share the same goals. But it's not quite the same as us having them fit into our goals. And one actually question that I had brought up, because we were told that if the MassDOT will fund, brings a project to us to fund, let's say it's a complete streets project, then if we fund it, then MassDOT will fund a complete street project itself. And I said, well, but that may affect the distribution of projects that we want to have funded, because the MPO wouldn't necessarily fund to complete street projects. I'm using this as an example. It's a really bad example because we like complete street projects, but the whole point though is that it decreases diversity of projects. But the argument, I guess, is that we want to do them all anyways, and so maybe you get a little less diversity, in this time period, but over the cycle of the LRTP, 20 years, you'll get the diversity you want. But still, though, we lose a bit of control when we don't have projects funded. And so, I thought that was a good argument, and I did press but let's keep a close eye on things, because it's just very evident, especially from the latest numbers that Ethan gave us. Those numbers aren't going to hold. The amount of money they have in reserve, like 1 year is like $615,000. It's like, that's not going to hold. We're going over budget, and we're going to have to shift things around. But as Ethan pointed out, I think things are going to shift around on their own. and part of the job of the board, is to, make the money match up, so that's what we do, So thank you, Ethan. Is there anything else you wanted from us from here?
Happy to answer any questions, but
sure,
that's really where I'm at.
Yeah. So get ready for the 3C committee to convene. So this is going to the board tomorrow. And then I think we are probably going to try and sign off again, and then you're going to try to release this thing on the 20th. Okay, so then that starts the clock ticking for us. And so I think we'll need to convene a 3C committee, probably towards the end of the month. So maybe didn't have this on the agenda, but we're going to need to have a 3C committee. I don't think Andy Reek is going to be around. He hasn't been at meetings lately, and so he'll probably go, I'd love to do this one, but I'm just too busy. I don't really know what's going on. So think about it, folks. Maybe an email coming out saying we need people for the 3C committee. All right, and then we may have to just kind of program that thing, most likely on a Wednesday, towards the end of the month, so that we can then bring in the comment to the full advisory council at our next meeting, sign off on that, then hand it over to the MPO for its May meeting, or one of its May meetings, that come before the comments are due. All right. So with that, we move on to the next item on the agenda, Stella. Okay.
And that is the approval of meeting minutes. I can just say really quick, apologies for the amount of minutes that we presented today. Based on kind of some priorities that the group identified a few months ago, we've been trying to work our way through the backlog of minutes. Those were from obviously 2022 and further back. So we're bringing several today, and we will be bringing several more over the next few weeks. But I am open to, I know this is a lot to kind of digest in one go, in addition to obviously the more recent past minutes. So I'm open to suggestions about how you would like to continue to kind of vote to approve these going forward, as we'll be bringing more and more over the next few weeks.
Sure. Well, you're catching up. So catch up however you can, is my opinion. But I think Anna Christina may have an opinion. Anna Christina?
No, I was going to say I only read February so far, so that would be the only one I could vote on for the minutes. So I apologize for that, but I didn't even notice till today. I went in and looked and saw how many there were.
All right.
I'm willing to. Do we have enough voters? In general, I sometimes feel it's okay to trust other people who have read or were at the meetings with the minutes. But in any case, I'll make a motion. Can we do them all at once? Can I make a motion to approve the minutes and see if we get enough?
Well, so then we'll have to clear that with Anna Christina, because my understanding too is that you don't really have to be at a meeting, to have approved the minutes, but then that does imply that you've read them. But I also feel that if you don't read them, you can also say, look, I trust other people, that they've gotten it right. And so,
well, if that's allowed, I do trust other people. So I will vote on all of them if you need.
I think it's a matter of, object now or forever hold your peace. And so if you didn't.
No, it's very rare. There's sometimes there's little tiny nuances, and I just.
Yeah.
I'll just wait
but I don't have to read it.
Okay. All right. So then that'll make it simple, and we can, approve all the minutes in one vote. And yes, please do just crank them out as quickly as you can. While you have the chance, and please do it. David Montgomery.
Hi, wait, did we get a second? Oh, I see. I thought you were roll calling. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I take everybody's point about the minutes. But I guess I would just share that from my perspective, the danger is that when you kind of accept the notion that you don't ever need to read them, then you never do read them. And that becomes kind of something that is, it's like a waste of everybody's time. If why put the effort into creating them if we never refer to them, never use them? So my personal preference is to abstain when I haven't been part of the meeting, or if I haven't had a chance to review it. And if 2/3 of the voting people are abstaining because they haven't read them, then we just wait till another time when we have read them. So that's my personal preference.
Right. Well, my take on the minutes, and one reason that I held out, for having more extensive minutes, certainly minutes. See, what I like about the MPO minutes, for the board meetings is that they're pretty extensive, and so I use them when I do research later on, and so. For me, it's not so much for what happened from one meeting to another, because I feel that you have momentum from one meeting to another, and you kind of going to cover what you're going to cover next meeting. But if I want to go back 5 years and go, okay, well, when we discussed this, what were people thinking? That's where the minutes really come in handy for me. And I value the minutes as opposed to the recordings, because I can just kind of get to the place in the minutes really quickly that I want to review, versus the recording, where it may take a little more effort to do it. And also, I can't go through the video as quickly as I can in the minutes. So that's how I use them, David. Anyways.
Well, should we see if we have enough people voting?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I move that we approve February 8th, 2023, January 11th, 2023, January 12th, 2022, December 8th, 2021, and November 10th, 2021 meeting minutes.
I can't second, so I'm going to need a second for someone else.
I'll second.
Thank you, Christina. I guess we'll do a roll. Stella?
Yeah, one moment. Okay, I believe we have quorum here. Okay, Len Diggins.
Yes.
Franny Osmond.
Yes.
Anna Cristina Fregosa.
Yes.
John McQueen.
Abstain.
Okay. Owen McDonald.
Abstain.
All right. David Montgomery.
I'm afraid I have to abstain.
Okay, so unfortunately, we don't have a passing motion there.
Can I make a motion to just do the February? Is there, how many people, did anyone else read at least February?
Well, I guess the question.
Am I the only one?
That was the only one I got to as well. I started January 11th, but I did not get to finish.
I can do February.
Can we at least do February, and I will try to read the rest of them by the next meeting?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So I move that we approve February 8th, 2023 meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay. Len Diggins.
Yes.
Franny Osmond.
Yes.
Anna Cristina Fregosa.
Yes.
David Montgomery.
Yes.
Owen McDonald.
Abstain.
John McQueen.
Yes.
And going down my list, am I missing anyone? I think John Seward dropped.
All right. So if you are conclusive with respect to being legal, I always thought that abstains were just kind of neutral. They weren't negatives. So if you had a majority of the quorum, and so are you saying that even with the abstains, we didn't have a majority of the quorum to pass the other minutes?
For the first vote on the entire set of minutes, I don't believe we had a majority now.
Of the quorum. Okay, all right,
Yes.
fine. Okay, all right. So we didn't have the majority.
For February, that motion carries though.
Okay, all right. So it was like 4-4 or something for the first one.
I believe so. I also
Okay.
think that a couple of members dropped off right before we did that. So
okay, fine. No problem. It is what it is. Okay, so well, let's hopefully folks can view the other ones, you know, and have those, because and keep in mind, so I guess let's just prepare folks, you know, because there will be, you know, the 4 that we did not approve, and then a bunch more, you know, try and get your reading done, you know, so we're catching up, you know, and it'll be a little intense, I mean, for a while, but then hopefully we'll get to a point where we're just reviewing one set of minutes, you know, a meeting. So, alrighty.
I will send out some reminders before the next meeting as well, because we will be bringing back these plus a handful of others. So,
alrighty.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Is that all we have?
Item number 6.
Oh.
Someone wants to say something?
No? Okay. So just really briefly, I wanted to share a short activity with everyone for the development of the Long Range Transportation Plan Destination 2050 discussions at the MPO board about investment programs and projects that will be included in the Long Range Plan. We have been doing some engagement. We circulated a brief survey, and this activity is essentially just that survey in an interactive meeting format. And the goal of this, we're sharing the results of the survey tomorrow with the board to kind of inform their discussion at tomorrow's MPO board meeting about LRTP investment programs and projects. This is kind of another opportunity to kind of collect feedback there and also help Len go into that discussion prepared with you know, the advisory council's feedback. So if you go to www.menti.com and enter this code in the box here, you can also scan this QR code on your phone. Let me know if you're having trouble with that. I can also drop the link to the full survey in the chat if you want that as a reference.
If you could do that, it would be much faster for me.
Sure. The only thing there, I will drop the survey as a reference. But for this activity, we're kind of trying to collect input in real time. So we won't be able to kind of translate it if you do it in the survey. And then real quick, I'm going to stop sharing that and share the survey itself. Sorry, let me get situated here. All right.
Is that it? Are you ready for me, Stella?
No, I just wanted to
okay.
put the results up on the screen so that everyone can see it as things are coming in here. Everyone see that okay? And apologies if the text is small, but it looks like we have strong support for bus improvements and transit improvements, as well as major transit infrastructure. These categories don't map exactly onto the categories that we actually use in the LRTP and TIP, but it's kind of a way to assess sort of broader, higher level priorities for types of system improvements that the MPO will be discussing. Wait, as a few more come in here, we have, looks like community shuttles is taking the lead. Now that's something we talk about often in this forum. bus improvements and major transit improvements still high.
Again, it's like a candy store, you know. Do I want chocolate bar or Swedish fish? I don't know.
All of them are such a sweet deal. How can we choose?
John, do you have a question?
Yeah. Under which category, let's say, would the I-90 project fit? And because that includes rail with West Station and Grand Junction and bus, because there's a terminal.
I think that would likely be major road, but it could also fall somewhere between major road and major transit.
Yeah, it's probably more of a road project than it is transit, I think, although because the transit's already there, really. Anyway, it's just a thought. It was tough to categorize that, put that into a category.
Are these just ours or are these other people's that have done it with ours added?
No, it's just ours.
Just from us today.
Yeah.
Right
Okay.
now.
What is, can you tell what the N is?
I'm sure it's just ours because it was showing zeros.
No, I know, but does it show on here like how many people voted?
I believe 3 are in so far. So if folks are
Okay.
still working on them.
Okay.
We can't see it, but from the person who's facilitating the survey could potentially.
But maybe at the bottom right, I guess, is that 3. Okay.
All right. Well, just an exercise. Hopefully you all saw the survey as well that went out in some previous communications. But Len, I hope this is helpful in kind of informing discussion tomorrow.
Let me quickly take a picture.
I'm happy to send a screenshot of the results over to you after this as well.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stella.
So let me stop sharing and I think another, I know we're almost at time. One other thing I wanted to quickly highlight before we leave is that we are holding a virtual workshop for our coordinated plan update, which we've talked about a couple meetings ago. That's going to be on Thursday, April 27th from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. The workshop is focused on human services transportation coordination, which again is a topic that I know we've discussed in this forum before. I would love to extend the invitation to the advisory council. I'll share this in a follow-up as well, but just dropping the Zoom registration in the chat. And then we also have a survey open for the coordinated plan that's asking about needs and priorities for transportation for seniors and people with disabilities primarily. So if you all would be willing to take that and share it with your networks, that would also be much appreciated. And I'm happy to connect offline and share this information again with the group.
Yeah. Sometimes what happens with me is I forget if I've taken a survey or not. So I mean, of course, if I start taking it again, I'll recognize that I've taken it. But sometimes I get them from multiple sources. Like, did I take that survey already? So
same.
So John?
Yeah. Well, Stella, will that discussion on the human services also bring into the picture to try and make sense out of the whole network of the ride and senior centers and local shuttles?
Yeah, definitely. We're inviting municipal councils on aging, disability commissions, and as well as transit providers from throughout the region. So the hope is to kind of have a pretty broad conversation about how to better coordinate at the local level.
Will it identify any areas of overlap or areas where maybe there could be just a collapse, let's say, of responsibilities, so that it's just one pocketbook funding an area for that kind of service.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is for it to be really, you know, an opportunity for folks to start thinking more about actions and strategies that can be taken up at the local level. So, you know, I think that's the main aim. We'll be talking about different, you know, coordination challenges and strategies and how to address them. So I'm sure that you know, the issues of overlap and gaps in funding that we've discussed here and in other forums will come up as well.
Great, thank you.
All righty. Well, we're going to sacrifice the chair's report. I'll just say that if you take a look at the video for the adjusted management meeting, and that was the latter half of March. I mean, it's a good meeting. And there's the study that we've been wanting to have done for a while. I mean, or at least we're tiptoeing into the congestion pricing. I mean, so it's a study, you know, what other properties, other areas are doing, other places are doing. So it was a good discussion, you know. So
can you send us the link or did you?
No, I did not. I mean, if you go to the calendar for the MPTO, it's in March. I mean, you'll find on a Thursday what's congestion management.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just I didn't drop it in just because I can't talk and drop things in at the same
time.
No.
I was thinking if you sent an email to all of us, then more people than just our here.
That's true. That's true. You know, so
Stella and Sean did drop some links there.
Okay. Great.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
It's great to have helpful assistance. It's what staff does. I mean, so much, I mean, especially me in this position. So with that, 4 minutes over. Forgive me, you know, and we'll call it a meeting. It was a good meeting, you know, and so.
You need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
I'll make the motion.
I will second that motion. Yes.
And without objection, we adjourn, folks.
Bye.
Bye, all. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll hang around, Stella. We'll debrief.
Bye.